Hello everybody, it's Mark Sage again, Executive Director of the area, and I'm doing another Fireside Chat. And this time, and I think it's probably the first time we've done it, it's one of our members that are university. I have two really awesome gentlemen and experts in the immersive technology field, but kind of their role is about using immersive technology in their teaching, but also on a kind of a wider scale as well. So helping, students understand what the immersive technology is going to be in the future. So as normal with my Fireside Chats, we'll ask three questions. So let's get going. So how pivotal is the integration of immersive technology in shaping the education experience for students? And what tangible benefits does it offer in terms of engagement and, really importantly, knowledge retention? Maybe Alex, if I start with you.
Well, I think in answering that question, we're looking at a time continuum in terms of how pivotal it is right now. Probably not pivotal is the truthful answer there. However, we have great ambitions in the university, as do lots of universities, to integrate more immersive technology in the education experience. There's a lot of good science behind this, going back to the 60s and 70s, that show that if you immerse people in a learning exercise, their retention levels are likely to be much higher. And that's something that we see ourselves from the small number of courses that we deliver here in the university directly in this space. We do get that feedback from students that they've really found it helpful in helping them to understand the concept, particularly since most of the interactions we have in the world are in the 3D space.
Perfect. Yeah, Brian, any more thoughts on that?
Yeah, we actually did some research on language learning a few years ago with a PhD student who built an Irish language learning VR application, and we found ourselves that the results mirrored those found by MIT in similar circumstances, that it was more about retention of information as opposed to you'd necessarily learn more information, which we thought was really interesting. And we actually find in cases where we incorporate mixed reality technologies into the classroom, just even as examples to students, that there's a lot more enthusiasm and engagement, that it's a form of breaking up the lesson from the kind of traditional chalk and talk and kind of workshop based to try something new, which is interesting because with our work with industry, some of the feedback has been, well, as long as it gets people to engage, you've already got a positive outcome from the application.
Fantastic. Yeah, thank you. Some great insights there. Maybe you can elaborate a little bit about TU Dublin and how you're actively incorporating leverage and immersive technology to enhance the learning environment. Talk a little bit more specific about the projects to highlight the technology.
Yeah, well, I'll let Brian talk about some specific projects. He's done a lot of work with a couple of sectors like the biopharma sector in particular. But we do have a number of courses. Brian and myself collaborate on those both at undergraduate and postgraduate level. We have an undergraduate program for AR and VR as a business tool, which incorporates some prototyping for students, but then on the creative digital media masters, where there's more time and scope and more technical requirements, students there, for example, also do as a compulsory module an AR and VR applications module that myself and Brian work on, and they're also working in other modules in the VR space. So it's something that, in terms of the courses and the curriculum, we're very keen to develop more. We are looking at new projects being rolled out with industry in mind. We're a very industry-centered university in the first instance. That is the ethos of what we try to do, is to be very close to what's happening in industry and to bring that into the classroom. So we think it's a really good fit for us joining the area as well, because it gives us the opportunity to leverage the connections with some of the top companies in the world who are deploying these technologies right now.
Perfect. Brian, I know you're doing lots in this space with your kind of
students. We're at a very interesting space. So there's a lot going on, say, mechanical engineering. Some of the guys over mechanical engineering, Alan McDonald, Dave McDonald, are doing some really interesting stuff incorporating mixed reality technologies into, learning and working on, complex bits of machinery. So the industrial use case is very clear. I think it's been clear for a long time. But what we're seeing as well now is I'm having people coming to me, say, from law and languages, saying, oh, how do I use this technology in the classroom? Or they just want to introduce it to, show some 360 videos or some third-party apps. And it's really interesting because I was complaining just before we started that I have to redo all my notes every year about this technology because it changes so quickly. And one of the things I'm finding is it's moving away from being very technically detailed about how you do these things to let's talk more about the use case and the user and the business case. Because technology is getting easier and easier, and there's so many third-party applications that you can do some very simple things really quickly. And like 9 times out of 10, you don't need to build a complex bespoke application. An off-the-shelf third-party app, even a game, can be exactly what you need in that sense. So it's an exciting space because people previously thought, oh, well, I need to have all this level of expert knowledge, or I need to get a programmer in and 3D modeler and all this. And now it's a case of I can grab all these open source assets. I can be up and running without having to touch a line of code very, very quickly. So people who wouldn't have gone near the technology previously are now using it in interesting ways, alongside the real strong use cases, say in engineering and other similar courses.
Yeah, just to add to that, I know that, you know, my focus has been very much on the use case, and we get the students in a couple of the modules to think about that. But I think even the work that the area has been doing in that, I know that it's been a big focus of what you try to do is to, number one, scour the environment to find good case studies, but perhaps most importantly then to allow, for example, through the ROI tool that you have, that's a great opportunity for companies to, as it were, plug in the data that they have and see what is the commercial proposition in terms of an AR development. So that's something that we're interested to explore further ourselves with the students as well, particularly as Brian says, we're moving towards a no-code environment. So really, we need our students to have both a creative but also a strong commercial perspective on this.
I think that's great. One thing I'm seeing across the industry is actually students and then people in companies deploying the technology, they need to be multi-skilled. You know, they're not a kind of a coder, they're not a technologist, they need to understand business, they need to understand people, and they need to understand technology as well. So being able to kind of teach them, and I know you guys are doing a great job on all of those facets, is really, really important. So, you know, thank you for the continued work you're doing in that space. Let's go to the last question, which is really all about best practices. So in implementing immersive technology, especially in the education side, what best practices and training do you believe are crucial for both the educators, obviously yourself, and the students to basically to harness this technology? And how does TU Dublin approach this aspect of integration to maximize the educational impact it has?
Well, I think you made an important point there, which is, you know, how do we get the educators involved in this as well as the end user who might be a student? So we're looking at a number of initiatives. Myself, I will be working shortly on an initiative of fellowship where we'll be looking at developing train the trainer type modules and initiatives that allow trainers within companies, but also educators, my fellow colleagues, to feel comfortable with understanding the range of applications of immersive technology generally, and also how they can actually shape it for their own classroom delivery. So I think that we're moving in that direction, and that's key. I think you've got to get enthusiasm among your colleagues, and Brian's pointed to that. He's getting them coming to him, which wasn't happening a few years ago, which is great to see. You know, there's no doubt there's a lot of awareness, and there's been a big change in the last few years. I think an area that I would specifically point to, which I think is interesting as educators, and this is a broad point in terms of the broad education model, a lot of focus now on what we call transversal skills or soft skills. And obviously as educators, when we're developing and redesigning our courses, we're paying a lot of attention to that now, rather than just the technical dimensions. And I think that's an interesting space as well. One initiative that we've just launched with the company called Body Swaps and Meta with the grant, we're looking at a few hundred students to allow them to improve their presentation skills using virtual reality training. And we've done some very early pilot research, but the results are really encouraging. Students do find that virtual reality is a great way to improve that skill set. And we as educators, I think, can benefit from it, because typically we don't have enough time or scale or resource to have students make multiple presentations to us. The academic term is just so short. So there's one small example where the soft skills dimension is really being aided by immersive technologies.
Awesome. Thank you, Brian.
Well, yeah, it's kind of building on Alex was saying. You know, there's a lot of work going on, and in large institutions and organizations, you can only usually sometimes find out about these things kind of after the fact. So myself and Alex a few years ago set up with funding from TU Dublin this community of practice, because there's lots of people doing bits and pieces around the university, and there's people in creative arts doing some really interesting creative stuff on their courses. You know, Alex is doing some great stuff in and around, you know, building up soft skills. And I'd always argue, look, soft skills are hard skills because they're really hard for some people to get right. So in a way, they're kind of they're as hard as any of the other hard skills that we usually think of. So we're sharing. I think it's about knowledge sharing, and I think it's about flexibility, because one of the things that I've learned in the virtual interaction research lab working with industry is it has to be flexible, that whatever sort of intervention we design or build, say in the biopharma sector, it has to be flexible so that the trainers and the organizations can inject or implement it whatever way they want. So we found early on there was a lot of resistance because people were saying, well, hang on, is this going to replace what people do? Is this going to replace online? Is this going to replace in person? And we are very clear to say, no, this is just a tool that you will use. So you can use it for onboarding before they come to training. You can use it during it or after. And we're finding the same thing in an educational context, that it's not about saying to students, you have to do this. It's like, you can do this if you want, but it's part of a number of tools. So there has to be that flexibility. And I think once people realize, how the technology actually can allow you to get up and running very quickly without too much complexity, there still is a learning curve, and then B, that this is about augmenting what you do, not replacing. Because to be quite honest, when you say to someone about incorporating this into their course, one of their first thoughts is, I have huge amounts of notes and presentations and workshop material, do I have to redo all this? And the first thing you say is no, and that straight away just lowers the barrier. So it's about flexibility and ease of use of the technology, I think, are the kind of two key things.
I think it's great, Brian, because that also goes into companies that are deploying the technology as well, that ease of use. And I do see this opportunity, and I think you guys are really helping it, is from a kind of a student being trained in it to training within a company to actually using it on the shop floor or wherever in the manufacturing line and stuff like that. So I'm sure kind of generations to come will be so used to this technology and be able to, implement it and use it to really help them kind of overcome the problems quicker and more effectively.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So guys, that's an amazing insight to the amazing work that you're doing. I look forward to continuing working with yourselves in the area, and we're looking at webinars and other opportunities as well. But for now, if it's okay, thank you very much indeed, and say thank you for your input.
Thank you.